Thank you so much, sir. It's always a pleasure listening to your insights. And now, are we ready for the first panel discussion? Are we? Yes? I see a lot of bright finance people in this room, bright, shining faces right now from up here. So can we have a louder yes from everyone? Can we build up the energy in the room a little? Yes, awesome. All right, so for our first panel discussion, we have the topic Future Ready CFO, the new mandate in a new world. The discussion will dwell upon the evolving roles of CFOs, the intersection of finance and technology, risk management, and much more. Before we begin, just give me a little moment to introduce our esteemed group of panelists who will join us on stage for this particular discussion. And as I call upon your names, I would request you to come and take your seats. First, we have Mr. Rahul Rao, CFO, Hindustan Construction Company Limited. Can we have a round of applause? Next, we have Mr. Arpit Kabra, Chairman, Western Indian Regional Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Let's keep the claps going, everyone. Third, we have Mr. Deepal Shah, Group CFO of Allcargo Logistics Limited. And to moderate this discussion, may I call upon Mr. P.K. Hari Subramanian, CFO of Cognizant Technology Solutions India Private Limited. The stage is yours, sir.
Check. All right. So we're good to start?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Avinash. I think that was a fantastic intro and context setting for the whole thing. And there were a few things that I wanted to say as context setting and to set the thing going. But I think most of it was covered so very well by Avinash. So I think we can just jump in directly into the conversation that we have to do. I mean, the topic of it is so interesting and so relevant in today's world, to have a future-ready CFO, the new mandate in a new world. I mean, coming to think of it, the world has changed, and how, right? I was just thinking about it a couple of days ago, chatting with my son, and obviously he's of the new generation. I can't call him Gen Z. Now it is like Gen Alpha and new words that are being coined. But I was talking to him about the X factor in one of my conversations, and I said, it's an X factor. And the way that we used to talk about X factor is something that is unknown, right? And now he corrects me. He says, Dad, life has moved on. In your days in algebra, X was the unknown. In today's world, X is the all-knowing, omnipotent one. That is Twitter. Right? And the world has changed. It's not anymore the unknown. X has become like the all-knowing one. So that is how the world has become. And now, in a world like this, things that have changed so quickly. Now, we keep saying history often repeats itself. It does, we have to agree, but the last 20 years history probably gets repeated within a 5-year now. The window has come down. Everything happens like so quickly, and it's in an ever-changing environment that we operate. Now, given that situation, I think a CFO is probably not in the most convenient or most comfortable position in a company. Now, when I say that, the reason is because he is in the most one of the most toughest positions sitting in a corporation to operate, given all the challenges that he has got to meet with the regulator, right? Because those who deal with the regulators regularly will know this and will realize it when I say this. For the regulators, their most lovable guy in a company is the CFO. If there is a problem, the first guy to get is the CFO, right? The CEO comes later. And the CFO, what does he do in a company? I think Avinash covered it so very well. His job has now become being a partner to the CEO. He rides shotgun with the CEO in his whole business. So anything that happens in the company, the CFO also has to be there. He should be in the know of things. He is not anymore a chief financial officer, but a chief future officer. And this is something that one of the American universities came up with. CFO is not chief financial, but it's a chief future officer. But the moment they came up with this idea, somebody else took it and said, now, chief future officer is going to be a marketing job, so it's a chief growth or chief future officer. So they took it away from finance. Like everything else, the finance guy does all the good work, but finally he doesn't get to enjoy it. But even in this world, I mean, the CFO is still the future of the company. Right? That is something that we all realize and we should be really proud of, because he travels so closely with the CEO as a partner. He gets to understand the business. He is actually the future of the company, and we see it in so many companies now around the world. The CEO moves out, retires, and the natural selection automatically becomes a CFO. And this is not something that we would have thought of in the past, like ever. You know, the CFO was a guy who was confined to a corner room, sitting and counting his numbers and, preparing Excel reports and stuff like that. But life has moved on. So it's not anymore the numbers game that, we are after. It's more about understanding strategy, working with the investors and stuff like that. In fact, I recall one of the, studies by Ernst & Young, where they did a study of all the CFOs, and they got to know that CFO spends on an average about 35% of their time in strategies only. Like then, I was thinking, so who takes care of your accounting? Who takes care of your FP&A, budgeting? Like it's all gone. It's out the window. So the CFO's focus areas have become very different. So once again, thanks Avinash for setting that context so beautifully. So in this new world, now for a future-ready CFO, there are a few things that we thought we should debate among ourselves and get to have some great wisdom shared with all of you. And I'm so proud to share the stage with this distinguished gentleman, because between us, I think we have more than 100 years of wisdom in this in this stage. So very proud to have people from such distinguished backgrounds and coming from diverse industries also. So I have a few questions. Maybe I will start with one to Rahul as we start.
Sure.
This is really about the economic crisis that businesses have gone through, and all of us understand it much better now, thanks or no thanks to COVID, right? The whole world went through a very different experience, which probably we hope doesn't come back to anybody else in the next 100 years. But now that we have seen it, now that we have been through it, we have lived through it, and humanity has come out of it successfully. Now, what are the lessons that we have learned out of it? Now, if there is ever a situation like this, an unprecedented challenge that comes up, what are the challenges that a CFO is going to face in that situation ever again? If it, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if it does, what are the challenges that he or she is going to face to be really future ready in those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, so I welcome all of you, and it's a very good question because we have gone through some unprecedented scenarios. The most important lesson which I personally have learned myself is that since situation may seem very bad, situation may seem very negative, but we have to keep not only ourselves as an individual level or organization level, but at various levels we have to keep optimism and of course keep on giving faith that future is going to be better, future is going to be workable. Sometimes we may fall, we may get hurt, but we have to always keep on telling we will rise up and we will get up. So that's most important aspect. It doesn't matter whether it is because of COVID or anything. Important is that we will fight back and we will return back to doing what we are supposed to do. And that message goes to different departments, because I will give you my own example. When we were talking about unprecedented situation, we are working in a HCC, which is basically a project site. So suddenly people are not available because they cannot go. We are not allowed to have people. I mean, we did test and everything. So a lot of things were required, but everybody started thinking how all this can be managed. So first thing is that don't think too much. Start thinking first, following what is the bare minimum requirements, and then start thinking about what better things can be done, organized. So people started coming out with, they will have their living place nearby, or they will be putting people over there. So many things started coming out. So automatically situation, when you start thinking coolly, when you start thinking more robustly, you are able to find a solution. What we are doing or getting more afraid is that suddenly new thing comes up and then what we have thought it is no more workable. So we should be ready that, okay, some things may not be working, but we will be keeping on reworking. That's one lesson which I feel will be very important. Second lesson is that we do say that we are trying to keep ourselves.
Hold the mic closer.
Yeah. Second thing is what we need to really work out is that, I mean, we have been talking about this cash is the king, and profits, sales, all these are very good to have, but finally cash is the king. And many companies have realized that, yes, how this cash is king is realized and how this really helps the companies to take tide over unprecedented situation. And third, which I generally believe is that, yes, there are always opportunities. Whenever something goes wrong, there is always this more opportunities. I will tell you that when situation became very bad, we thought that things will not bounce back, but suddenly situation became that yes, we are able to get more business, and then we were in a position because we had to reduce some of our people. So getting back people and all this became a little more difficult. So when next time when something like that happens, we have to have somewhere, we will be saying that, okay, we will have some fixed manpower, but at the same time, some floating manpower. We are working on various solutions.
Okay, fantastic. So that's like, you sound like Churchill now, to say that never let a crisis go waste. A crisis actually brings up more opportunities. And if you're an optimist, you actually get to see a lot more of positivity, a lot more of interesting challenges and opportunities than actually a crisis. Very interesting. Well, now that we also have the benefit of having none other than the WIRC chairman, of ICAI, Arpit, I would like to come to you with an interesting question. I mean, I also gave a lead into that, while we started. The CFO is the friend of and the most loved friend of all regulators, right? And given the Indian context, we have a plethora of laws and regulations, and it's only increasing further. I mean, granted that, I think we should also, at this point, I would also like to compliment the government of India for kind of cleaning up a lot of the old laws and making it more relevant to us, trying to clarify things as and when that's coming up. So the machinery is really getting, much more stronger and much more, refined, I would say. And they're ready to listen to us, which is all very good in current world. But even having said that, especially if it's a listed company that we are working with, the level of compliance is like phenomenal. And now the question becomes, what does a CFO really do? How is he really going to face all these challenges of increased compliance and talk about the new BRSR regulations and stuff like that? So what are the different challenges that you see that's occupying a CFO's mind typically with compliance requirements? And do you think a CFO can still peacefully sleep at night, given the number of complaints he has to meet?
At the outset, let me thank Dun & Bradstreet, Vinash, and all of them who've set up this wonderful panel. And thanks, Hari, for the wonderful question. In fact, if we are talking about CFOs, if regulatory requirement is and a regulatory environment is not talked about, I think it's like jal bin machli. And to start off, as Avinash mentioned in the start, when he spoke about what's happening in different parts of the countries, it's an eye opener. You see a drastic shift in the way Indian companies are being now nourished, the way they have been brought up, and now the way they are being nourished or they are expected to work. So for a moment you will see, because this is a transition, for a moment you will see there is a pressure. But what I believe is, with this becoming part of the DNA of a company, probably this will smoothen out, this will settle down, this will be a very, very effective exercise. You started a question with the regulatory environment, and therefore let me tell you how CFO is in a catch. In his office, he has to work on micro issues. Everything, every granular thing, every aspect. And I think the moment everyone is leaving after dinners, after office dinners and all, you'll see some lights in the office of a tower, and they will be the finance team. They are still there. They'll be working, and they are working on the granular parts, the micro parts. There could be a tax demand, there could be some small little interpretation issue that has cropped in, and they'll break their heads for like longest of the time, with suddenly one wise man council coming and saying, nahi, ye to isko ek line aur ye hum aisa karenge. And so everything is put to rest. But in that entire scenario, when he has to go to a board, when he has to sit with the CEO, he has to talk everything about macro. He has to talk about vision, he has to talk about everything, and his input is only that two lines that CEO has to put across that, acha, in all of this situation we have to look at this. And that brings me to a very important line that I always have heard about is, and that is important for every CFO. Usulo pe jo aanch aa jaye, to takrana hoga. Understand the concept, because, and being in India, let me tell you, this runs deep in our DNA. The ethics, the integrity, all of these are very strong. Imagine a scenario wherein a promoter asks someone to pass an entry so that there could be a potential diversion of funds. In a situation, this would be a suicidal for a CFO if he is aware of it. And he will plant those red flags, he will plant those whatever. Of course, he'll put up a face to the auditors, he'll do everything, but in his mind he knows there is something wrong on the ethics and integrity part, and therefore that CFO will, and let me tell you, this also becomes important in the regulatory space, because when some people come to your office, it is the CFO first who will be caught. There is no one else. The CEO comes, the promoter comes, and the promoter will have an army of lawyers. They'll have an army of consultants working along with them. But who's there for the CFO? Only his team. And probably that team would be here and there everywhere. And they'll be reaching out, poaching out everywhere to get data, get information and whatnot. And that's, with the new laws, with the new set of discipline coming in, it's gonna become more and more, it's become more and more, it's become more and more stressful. Let me use that word, because to an extent, he knows if it is coming on ethics or integrity, I'll have to raise up, I'll have to stand up. Now that is a very, very different call, but believe me, as you said, the past repeats itself. In India, if you pick up any story, there is no happy ending to a story. You pick up Ramayana, there is Uttar Ramayana. That is the end of everything. You pick up Mahabharata, Mahabharata doesn't end with everyone dancing around, yes, we won. It ends with the consequences that each one of them face, with Yudhishthira going to the heaven. All of these, so that is the reality. Unlike the West always talks about happy ending. It never here. And therefore, that is part of our DNA, that is part of every individual. And therefore, in this regulatory space also, I believe, this is that transition phase. This is a good governance phase that has come in. Yes, transitions are always a little bit stressful, but it will become a part of life. But it will smoothen out, and it will be a very, very effective exercise over a long run. Because it will become something that is natural to you will happen. And therefore, as you mentioned, after COVID, we are lucky that we are alive. And these lines, let me complete the lines. उसूलों पे जो आँच आ जाए तो टकराना होगा. जो अगर जिंदा हो तो जिंदा होकर दिखाना होगा. And that becomes very true for a CFO in real sense, because he has to himself not only save himself, but those maybe 10,000 employees who are working in that factory, their households. So 10,000 multiplied by 3 or 4, all of those factory owners, their households are worked on him. So this regulatory is, I think, a blessing in disguise. Of course, it's a typical scenario. It's a difficult phase. You said about BRSR. Very soon you'll have so ESG and all of this. This is a huge pressure. Imagine taking out the plastic in your toothbrush. How is that possible? For all of us, most of this, there's a huge wisdom in this room. For all of us, how many of us have ever drank water from a tap? For us, it is this 20 rupees bottle, plastic. It has to be there, it will be there. Now that is what is a huge pressure on a CFO. And as you said, future, now as a CFO, it is his role now to chart this path out. A CEO may not do this, but it is the CFO who has to do this, because when it comes to compliance, when it comes to balance sheet, it is he who is answerable. SEBI will come to him, other people will come to him, the party is out at his expense. So I think this regulatory space is going to be a very interesting space, but I believe this will smoothen out, this will be it's just like that curve. Right now we are having an ascent, but then it will go smooth, is what I understand.
Fantastic. Thanks, Arpit. That was great insight. And since you touched upon, we have not had so many happy endings in our stories, I think it's also right to point out that, in our tradition, the way, like you rightly said, our tradition steeped in ethos and integrity and all that, we've also been trained to accept good and bad, happiness and sorrow together. Matra sparshastu kaunteye shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama apayino nityaha tan stitikshasva bharata. Bhagavad Gita, right? So we've been taught to treat, victory and failure alike. Don't get too over ecstatic about a victory, but when there is something that's pulling you down also, just try to still stick and, do your job well. So I think that comes in our, in our line naturally. So it's That's a pretty good insight that you had. Thank you so much for that. And since we spoke about also change, change is the only constant. It's a cliche. We've all heard so much about that. And change, stands at your door, and you always look at change as as a difficult thing. You frown upon it. You don't want to accept change until it actually becomes your deadly neighbor. You start living with it. Then you actually say, maybe it's good. Maybe it's going to give me a better life. That's the way we start looking at change. And who drives changes? Typically we would want to say it's the CEO right from the top, the tone at the top. He drives the changes through the organization. But in reality, I think even though the CEO actually calls the shots at that level, most of the organization, all the corporate functions in today's world is all rolling up to the CFO. And the CFO is the guy who actually runs, a big part of the digital transformation. Again, pointing to a McKinsey study, it says, of all the companies which are running transformation, only 8% of the companies really succeed in doing the transformation. And even there, if a CFO and his team are actively involved, then the transformation is actually very, very impactful, truly. And that's McKinsey studying transformation for decades, and this is the final wisdom that they have gleaned out of it. So that shows the importance of the change and the CFO's role in getting there. Now that gives me a very good segue to get into Deepal, because he has done a lot of digital transformation projects in his life. And so Deepal, I come to you with this question. I'm thinking about the digital transformation piece, which again Avinash spoke about. That's like one of the key goals of the modern CFO. Now technology and digitalization are completely reshaping businesses. Now whatever we would have thought of yesterday or dreamt of yesterday has already become a reality. Somebody else has done it. That's the way technology is working. We talk so much about generative AI, we talk about ChatGPT. Again, a nice reference that you made about the script being written by ChatGPT. But we also read articles that says that for every question you ask ChatGPT, it is drinking 500 ml of water. Right? It's again going to be an impact on the ESG side of it. So it's not going to be a good thing to follow it forever. Having said that, now we know that tech is there to stay. Digitalization is there to stay. You cannot, it's like the change that's become a deadly neighbor, right? You cannot stay away from it. You have to necessarily learn to live with it. Now with that in place, how do you think, I may have a follow-up question there, but to start with, how do you think it's going to enhance the life of a CFO, looking at it from the prism of financial planning or analytics or decision making, etc.? How do you think it's going to really come handy?
So thanks for having me. First, I want to make a few comments. Change is not your neighbor, it's your wife or your spouse for that matter. It's that close. So you cannot live without it. Yeah? So change is very important to survive. Change brings, it's mandatory for survival. Second point, when coming to business planning and the role of CFO, I will also kind of touch upon a point. So I have had the privilege of being a CEO of one of the divisions for 12 to 14 years, and then I moved to the group CFO role. So I've kind of tried to play both sides. And I've realized that at the C-suite, whether it's the CEO, the CFO, or the CPO, or the CIO, I think the lines, functional lines are fading very fast, I think. Each one becomes very responsible, right? And it's really a partnership at that level. And CFO comes very, very close to the CEO in terms of business partnering. So the traditional role in terms of, I'm just setting the context, in terms of the business planning and analytics that the CFO used to provide for the CEO, even for that decision making, was very back office. I mean, if you look at the whole evolution, earlier, people used to struggle to get data which is within your company, in terms of how your numbers are there, which products are doing well, which markets are doing well, which product is selling at what price. So earlier days, we had those kind of problems. From the inside information, by the time we actually kind of started to get the ERPs and things in the control, people started to look at information outside in terms of how the external world is going to impact my business. And those elements came into business planning and decision making. And one thought on decision making that I want to say is that I have always been a proponent of one theory is that if you don't have data, then it's an opinion. So any decision which is backed without data is an opinion. So I think we have to really carve out opinions and data backed decisions separately. But this is very, very important for us to understand. With the increasing availability of data and tools, so from outside in, today, as we stand, what are we looking at? We're looking at a really changed world, and I'm actually happy to have seen this whole evolution in my lifetime, where you not only are getting outside in information, you are able to get information based on the whole big data analyticals as a tool, gives you information which is unprecedented to make your business plans for the future, which products work. The capability of all the AI and the algorithms, if you look at how some of the big players like, the e-com companies, how they're able to, forecast at the customer level, the possibilities of which color the person will choose, what is the, the ability to get those insights is amazing today. I mean, some of you, all of us are using, all the social media platforms. And if you go and search for something, so if you search for a holiday, say, for example, in Mauritius, on your Google Chrome, and you go back to a social media, you will see an ad around that. So the capability, in life, I always believe there are two players, from a restaurant perspective. Either you have a niche restaurant, which gives you very customized food. You can say, I don't want chili, I don't want salt, I don't want oil. You can keep customized. And then you have the big guys like the McDonald's, there's no customization, so it's standardization versus customization. Today on the data front, what we are seeing is mass customization. The capability of data and tools to actually penetrate at the individual customer level has reached a very, very high level. Now, imagine that data and that insight at customer level, bringing those tools into your organization, what it can do in terms of your planning, your capability to win in those markets. So I think the CFO's role here very clearly is to enable business with those tools. If we are unable to build that tool, your competitive advantage to survive in that business goes down that's what my understanding is. So I strongly believe that data-backed decision is the right decision to make. Gone are the days where we didn't have the data. Today we have the tools and we have the data. So if you're making business plans or decisions without taking all these accounts, you're groping in the dark. And there's a lot of element of luck to survive then. Whereas I believe the brighter side is that if you use those elements, there's a fairly good chance to kind of do better in terms of your planning. That's what my understanding is.
Fantastic, great insights, Deepal. Now I'll kind of take a follow-up question there for you. You spoke about how data is so important, and any thoughts without data is just an opinion. It's a fantastic thing. That's really how a CFO looks at it. So you are a standout example there. But the point is now data has become the new oil, for the entire economy. And I used to be a techie myself. I'm talking about like 20 years back, 25 years back. I used to sit and write coding. I used to build systems more out of passion than as a finance guy. But from those days to now, when I look at it, those days it was, the data was very clean and available. You know where exactly to touch and pick up, and you know exactly to pull it into your coding. You know how to structure it, get into your database and do it. In today's world, it's become like water everywhere and not a drop to drink. It's like data is everywhere. Such a data plurality everywhere. So you take a large corporation, every single department prepares its own, analysis, and it's all, mind you, it's all supposed to be from the same database, but each one has a different slice and dice and presents a different story. Now the CEO sits in a meeting, and also the CFO, the same information that the CFO knows, which is untrue, is being presented by somebody else, one of the business guys, You know it is untrue, but he still is going to say it's a data from our data store. Now there is plurality of data. There is so much of data available across your entire organization. Right? Now, how do you make sense out of it? How do you get it into some form of control and some sort of relevance so that you know this is exactly how this data is generated, this is the origin. It's like putting a certificate of origin to your goods. How do you structure it into that flow and make sure that the organization has right controls around it?
Yeah, thanks. My understanding, I'll share my understanding on this. So I think there are two parts to the data. I think one data is which is internal data, which are your transactions and those things. I think that's a clear hygiene issue, and if you're getting multiple data points from there, it's an hygiene issue, right? There has to be very clear what is known as a single source of truth in your organization. If you're using multiple applications, there are good chances that they're not talking to each other well, and you're getting multiple data points, and that can be a killer, and that can drive you to bad decisions and confusing decisions as well. So as far as internal data is concerned, my view is that there has to be a single source of truth, and that has to be, it's a hygiene issue. As for external data, yes, we've moved from, I was just talking, again, I have a son who's a teenager. So way back, in our days, being, sir is here, but being a chartered accountant, if we were stuck in a problem, we never knew where to go. We used to ask in the library, somebody, just help me out, I'm not able to understand this. Today, I ask him, if you have any doubt, please come to me, because he's also on the commerce side, he's also trying to do a CA. So he tells me, I don't need you, I just go to YouTube, So that there is so much data available, and you're right, and the capability to understand which is right or wrong, and more so even in tweets and in the opinions that we're getting, I think the external, internal data that you bring in from external, I think the bigger role there is you can't control the data, is the capability to judge which is right, the capability to depend on what will influence your decision, whether it's right or not, will become more of an art rather than a tool, because the tool can only give you data, but capability to judge which is right or wrong, it slowly gets into less of science and more of your judgments, is what my understanding is, unless we find tools in AI which are again capable to go back and see if the authenticity of the data is right or wrong, and those also will emerge and we will evolve as we go along. Yeah.
Perfect, super. Thanks, Deepal. So we speak so much about AI, coming into data and all that. And, there's an interesting tidbit that I would like to share. The so-called chatbots and AIs that we are, talking about, it's not yesterday's invention. Going back in time, 1966 or 64, I think it was 66 to be precise, there was a scientist at the MIT labs who designed a chatbot that was called Eliza. Right? And he designed it more out of his passion, pet project kind. And he said, okay, let me have something to chat with and have response. Like he was feeling so bored, maybe he didn't have his wife around. So he said, okay, let me design something which will talk back to me. And what was designed like that as a chatbot, a true chatbot in those days, and it might still be available as a MS-DOS program for you to test in different websites. But that, in reality today, it has become a much more evolved version, and you have a great AI tool in our hands. Now that brings us to the topic of, what do you do with innovative ideas? How do you look at innovation? And I'll pose this question to Rahul, given his interesting background. He's not just about finance, but he has also run his own consulting firm. He has got a very varied flavor of doing different things. So Rahul, the question is for you. Now, as we think of companies embracing digital information, right, the CFO is left in a very, very bad spot. In the sense, he also has to support the company to proceed with the innovation. But he is also more or less, almost often, he is the owner of the enterprise risk management team. Right? He also has to look at the risk management. He also should encourage and motivate innovation. He should also be in a position to get some dollars out for supporting innovation. Now, so how do you balance, how should a CFO typically try and balance the thing between innovation and risk management? Because not every innovation is going to be a great idea that will actually see light of the day. It could actually be fraught with the risk if it is not done properly. So what do you think should be the lookout from a CFO's mind?
Maybe I can give you some my own examples, which I had done during my European CFO stint. And I mean, to be very frank, these are not two something like either or one. Both can coexist together, and they need to coexist together. We had this, I mean, I was working in a EPC company for water management, and there were some companies which were our competitors who were coming out with some solutions which were cheaper, and they were not going to be lasting for long, but some of our clients, they started using those as the way to work. So when I started understanding it was certainly going to have big problem on our business plan, we had assumed some sales, some order intake, everything was going little haywire. So then I started sitting with our R&D team. So the R&D team, they were very good in terms of R&D, but they were not knowing exactly what R&D they have to do. Then we started looking at our marketing team. We all sat together. The marketing people started saying we are going to have one area of focus wherein cities require these water management plants. So in cities, what is the most important factor? Space available. So is it possible to have a solution wherein the space available will be limited and you can double the capacity or 50% increase the capacity? This is how the people started looking inside the team, inside the company, and then the R&D team came out with some solutions. And we were able to use this, and it became a very big hit in one of the our Turkey markets. Another solution was like, again, we were talking about water. I will give you the same example, water. So Switzerland is a country wherein water, when we talk about water, it has a lot of impurities, and they do ensure that it gets covered up. But at that time, it was in 2014-15. So microplastics, what is like when we do scrubbing or something, microplastics, they get into the water and it pollutes. So no other country were thinking about this. But Switzerland started saying, no, we want to control that. This is how then we started making our, based on, I mean, this new technology which was created was not useful for even Romania or Austria, but it was then specifically used only in Switzerland because there the market was there. So my point is, you have to know what is the environment, you have to know what is the requirement of the market, who can pay for the market. When you combine everything together, you will be able to find out solution. And yes, you rightly said that, I mean, it was quite a little bit time consuming because not everything comes out very quickly. But the 6 months or 8 months which was put into this, over next 3-4 years, it was going to give us quite a good benefit. So what is important is, and again, I am not against the thinking of people, they keep on talking about a lot of automation and AI and all that, but what I generally believe, I myself am an engineer, I am not a CA, I am engineer and I did my MBA, but I generally believe that lot of R&D or lot of things is possible in pure technical areas which is somehow not happening. I will give you, now I'm working with HCC, people don't want to work inside, people don't want to work at the, where the actual road gets developed or tunnel gets bored. And that's the mentality. I agree that I also don't want to go, but I still go to sites whenever there are certain areas where some problems are there. Because unless you go and experience, not everything can be done automation, done and we can have the data points coming up and then solutions coming out. So being at site, being at the project, being at the people. In fact, I have started going to meet various people from our customer side because some of the times we have some funding problems. So I go to them, I explain to them why they should give money earlier. So everything which is going to have an impact in terms of business. And you rightly said initial, or also Vinash said that everything which is going to have impact on business, CFO has to start getting involved. And when I say getting involved, it's not just telling somebody else. He has to start doing, he or she has to start doing it himself and then show to the world that yes, these things can be managed or can be done. This is what is my perception, that we cannot have everything that ready-made available, and you have to be in making of the things.
Perfect. So you're saying the CFO should actually nurture innovation while still managing risk, and both can be managed and balanced nicely.
Yes.
Fantastic. And that actually provides answer to one of the big paradoxes that CFOs had expressed. One of the most recent studies by Ernst & Young, about CFOs' perception of challenges that they faced. There were three big paradoxes that CFOs were fraught with. They were facing big challenges on three important questions. One was short-term versus long-term. Should I really look at the long-term future of the company and say, let's go ahead and invest, or should I be worried about the short-term impact on the street? Should I actually, cut down dollars and say, okay, I've made better margins for this? So that's like one big question. Second was exactly what we spoke now, safety versus risk. That was the second big question. Should we actually take more comfort in being very safe, not expand too much, or should we bite the bullet, take risk and move on? And the third one is an actual, it's a very interesting thing and more relevant to today's conversation itself. And with that, I will actually jump on to Arpit because that really belongs to you. The third big question was, how does a CFO really become a strategic leader? Should we be focusing on strategic skill sets, or can he completely come out of the traditional skill sets of what is required of finance and accounting and all that? So what do we really focus on was a big question that CFO was asking. He was like, I can't let go of my bread and butter. But then the market also expects the CFO to be riding to develop the future for the company. So it's a question of skill sets. It's a question of talent. Then it automatically leads us to the question of what do we do with the future CFOs who are coming up? When you think about it in terms of talent that is available, the talent pool that we have, and you are the best person to answer it now because you deal with students day in, day out. How do you look at the evolving talent space? What should be the future CFOs lookout be, around talent and talent management, basically?
I think a beautiful question at the correct time. He just spoke about a teenager coming up and saying, I look up to YouTube because there is someone whom I am looking up to. Before that, you made a point, who has the biggest problem, what I see right now, who in a room full of people sitting with their laptops, as you said, same set of data, but someone presenting something which is not in sync with their data will stand up and say, hey, look, this is wrong. And third, when he said that, there is no person who's really looking forward to go there and do that on the ground level. And at the same time, you have the highest population in the country, 140 of the world. There are some set of people who are shouting that there is no employment. And on the other side, there is a story which talks about huge boom in the entrepreneurship. Everyone today is ready with a phone, with a ring of light, microphone, and is creating content, earning money, getting to do a lot of stuff on his own. Why would he want to do any of this work? And keep in mind the recent trend of, so suppose if DNB wants to do a big program, there is a big thought leader or there is a big influencer who's just recently got, say, millions of likes. Whom would they prefer? Because young people, if they are to come up, have to pull them, and they were on the front page of, say, the Times of India, something that we've looked for like ages. So therefore, these three things is what I'm trying to combine and trying to answer your query is, a CFO, and I do a lot of reading on spirituality and a lot of these Indian myths and all because I get a lot of breakthroughs through them, especially Bhagavad Gita. But let me tell you, if war was to be won by Pandavas, they have to be excellent in their skills, their war skills. Who created that war skills? Dronacharya. He used the same man for Kauravas also. But what made Pandavas win was the culture, their ability to stay with the truth. So my point is, we need Dronacharyas in our offices. And immediately I connect with the conversation that Mihir, Nandini and Vipul and we were having the other day in the office. A CFO now has to grow out of that role of just looking at those numbers, doing those compliances and making sure there is a dashboard so that all the tick boxes are done. See, he has to play that role of a Dronacharya. He has to grow some Arjunas. He needs to bring those Arjunas so that the company survives, he excels. I don't know whether CFOs except for events like these, get that credits in real time, acknowledgement and everything. But in real sense, if they have to work effortlessly, as you mentioned, sleep peacefully in the night, their role now, and this is based on recently, I was speaking in one of these conferences, someone was really, a senior banker was pointing out some facts, something. Someone stood up in the audience and said, no, wait, this is wrong, because मेरे को ये बोला गया है, ये data है. And everyone agreed. The experience of this gentleman was put to test by a single statement. No one verified. See, no one verifies this कि अरे ये data बराबर है कि नहीं है. We need to create that culture. That CFO has to empower his entire team to be upfront. For example, recently I was in a board wherein receivables were being questioned. Everyone was talking about, say, one number, and Ketan Bhai is here, the treasurer, and Saurabh, both of them, we were all together. We were all questioning on a larger number, say around 700 crores plus of receivables that is there, XYZ. No one questioned on what is the breakup or whether all of these have been covered up in that receivables, except for one person. Now that, I think, therefore the entire role to answer your query is, we need that mindset. Now, if I were to even say that, a CFO should now become a pseudo academician in that sense, I won't be wrong. I will not hesitate, because at WIRC or at ICAI, whenever we see some really fantastic members from industry, a CFO or a CEO who comes and talks about academics, and that is what the discussion we were having the other day. We need to have a lot of, this country needs a lot of accountants. And at WIRC, at ICAI, we feel we need to go one step ahead and say, this country needs a lot of ethical accountants. Now, these ethical accountants can only come if you create a culture, if you give them that space to grow, if you give them that, and when I'm talking about growth, let me tell you, and this is for all those CFOs who really feel that they are neglected sometimes, or they are not even given due credits. मेहंदी जो हीना बोलते हैं, वो रंग लाती है जब वो पिसती है, और बीज जब तक पेड़ बन के फूल और फल नहीं देता, जब तक वो खाक में नहीं मिल जाता है. You need to actually get rubbed in the mud. You need to really go into that space to be a future ready. So if you are building a legacy, if you are building an organization, if you are building something extraordinary, you need to have this academician stint with you. If I were to give you a coin, if I were to coin a term right now, that comes top of my mind, we need to give a nest. Ghosla, nest. Nest is a place where the eggs get hatched, they get nourishment by whoever, their mentors, by mothers or whatever, and then they take a flight from there. They don't come back. You need to create a nest. Nest for me, for CFOs in this world, for future should be networking, entrepreneurship, soft skills, technology. You need to serve a nest, be an academician like a Dronacharya, give them that space, give them that nourishment, give them that culture. Technology sab RSC, I told you, it's available on Instagram, it's available on YouTube, everywhere. But as he mentioned, which is the right data? That teenager must be looking at a data which is, or maybe say tax pad raha hai YouTube pe, but it is an obsolete, it's an old thing. Amendment aa gaya hai, usko kya malum? And therefore the experience will come into picture. He is the one who's updated. And therefore, the combination of experience and energy is what a CFO will have to bring in his office. He'll have to create that set of culture. He'll need to bring that culture. He'll need to set up that culture. He'll have to actually take out time from doing the mundane task, create, and I always say that, there is a huge army, and since chartered accountant is where I come from largely, interaction with them, and I deal with them in and out, they all believe we should have that, we should not be a bakasur, मतलब जैसे कि सब मेरे को दे दो, सब हमको कर दो, आप बन जाओगे बकासुर, मतलब साइज बड़ा बन जाएगा. You should be that Ashthat Lakshmi, Vishnu Lakshmi is what we call 8 hands. You should have multiple hands. You should have multiple arms to work on your projects. And you, in a space, you should work to give, these talents. You never know, one of these guys could be the next unicorn builder. You've seen so many examples of young people, 20, 19, and setting up big, big companies. And if that is happening, and that's not just out of anything, it's because of the entire ecosystem that has developed. It is because of some parameters going right for them, and some people who've helped them. Now, if that CFO does that for this company, probably everything that he does, all the 3 problem statements that we talked about, would be absolutely kept in check, especially the data one. And let me tell you, we all have to be very, very careful about the data that we are using, because baki aur kuch hai ki nahi hai, India has come out with now Data Privacy Act. There is something called as generally accepted privacy principles that will soon be there, just like there are already in this world. And the penalties are massive. If you thought IBC was the one to discipline companies, wait and hear what this Bharat is bringing up next. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Arpit. That's very insightful. I mean, thinking about the fact patterns that you said and about the story of Dronacharya, how he trained people, etc., I'm just taking a moment to reflect upon how life has changed for us as finance professionals. A lot of you can relate to this part when I say this. In our days, when we were article clerks and we were going for audits, we must have encountered clients who were sitting on the other side of the table telling us one sentence: your age is my experience. Right? How many of you have heard that? We have, right? I can see so many hands going up. We have heard that. But in today's world, it's totally different. So last week we were talking to one of the mutual fund managers, and he was telling me, I'm sitting in front of a client who's managing thousands of crores of investment. And Soumya would remember this. It happened last week in one of the meetings. He said this CFO who's managing thousands of crores of money was aged all of 27 years only. Now, where do you go and talk about like your age is my experience? Life has moved on. Things have become so different. But I completely accept your point that CFOs have to really be acharyas, and you have to create good talent and great talent and instill the sense of ethos and integrity in them. Great point. A special applause on that for you. Thank you for bringing that up. Now, when we do that, and the question goes back to Deepal, because he has again worked on human talent part of it earlier, some part of his career. He has worked big time on talent retention, shaping up the right talent, etc. So when you think about all these facts, how do you actually build this thing? Now we accept that the CFO has to be a continuous learner himself, right? We cannot be happy with whatever we have learned until yesterday. We have to keep learning ourselves. And you never get to hire a great team. You can't always hire the best talents. You can't go out and hiring Virat Kohlis for your team. You have to build a great team. And that happens by continuously investing in the people, investing in talent. How do you actually motivate and build that culture of innovation and continuous learning in people's minds? Because that's going to be how we build the future CFOs and make the CFOs also future ready. Any thoughts on that, Deepal?
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to keep it short in the interest of time. I think very important 2 points, I think, what Arpit mentioned. Culture, it's very important. And what we believe is, I'll take the learning part and innovation part in 2 buckets. I'll touch upon the learning part. I think it's very important to create a learning organization. So I strongly believe that nobody has all the knowledge. Yeah. So at any level. So I think when you're recruiting, I think the best thing to do is look at the attitude, because the knowledge gap is something which you can definitely bridge. And what we do is, we did this pre-COVID, and it's kind of slided away a little bit, and we have to rekindle that. We, on a monthly basis, had a fun Saturday where we used to share learnings. And if there are new case laws or there are new technologies, we used to come and share that, and we used to have an open forum. And that really helped create a learning organization. So it gets a lot of cross-pollination of ideas, cross-pollination of knowledge, which is the learning organization that each department or each company needs to create. A regular, a free willy discussion is very important, and bring in people from outside. So knowledge gap can be bridged through the learning process. On the innovation bit, very important is that unlike earlier days, today all companies in the long run are technology companies. And technology is all about continuous improvement and innovation, right? So each organization needs to have an incubation center. And what we have done, and I'm sharing some experiences and ideas. Unlike innovation, typically, I'm sitting in a lot of people with a lot of experience, but innovation and fresh ideas come from young people. So the average age of the organization defines how innovative an organization can actually be. There is a higher probability. There are no finite answers to any of these. But so what we do is we created something like a shadow board, where all the young people, we bring them up. And we discuss problems, and we create those committees where they are able to throw in ideas. Young people who have, I'll just finish in a minute here. So the young people bring in fresh ideas, and these ideas are not only because they are young, because it's also many times outside in. So we look at people who are young, both from an age perspective and young in the organization as well. They've come. So we get an outside-in perspective in terms of ideas and innovation. So these are two things that we've done, and they have been helpful for us.
Perfect. Fantastic. That's great insight. Thanks, Deepal. I think we have run 3 minutes above time, and I think we tried to cover most of the the important topics for the CFO community. I think it was very insightful for me, a lot of learnings. Thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your experiences. Thank you.
May I have a huge round of applause again for our esteemed panelists and our moderator here. And now may I request Mr. Mohit Gupta, Senior Director of Sales for Dun & Bradstreet India, to hand over some mementos for them. Applause going, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. You can be with me. Thank you so much, panelists.